Hi, my name is Yestin Rosiles, and like any good student, like any student that wants to make their life as easy as possible, keep their assignments straight to the point and simple, I decided to do my language and speaker profile on a language that would not make me want to pull my hair out from studying it. So I chose Cantonese. Now, I'll be honest, when I brought this up to my speaker, the very first thing I told him was, yeah, I decided to do my project for this semester on Cantonese. And, being a Cantonese speaker, he just kind of looked at me like, why? Now, I don't mean this negatively at all, of course. Cantonese is just hard. Cantonese is a language spoken in the southern Chinese provinces of Guangdong and Guangxi, and also in Hong Kong and Macau. It's also widely spoken by overseas Chinese all over the world, with some of the largest communities in Southeast Asia. So, just within the same area, just not the same country. Cantonese is a Sino-Tibetan language that originated in the city of Guangzhou. Cantonese is the traditional language spoken by the Yue Chinese group, which up to this day has around 85.5 million speakers. By some, Cantonese is considered a dying language, and yes, numbers have declined, but 85.5 million speakers is a lot. To put that into perspective, if every Cantonese speaker came together to create a new country, that country would be the 19th most populated country in the world. I'm no linguist, nor am I a language expert, but although it may be dying, I would say it's still got some life in it. Now, being a Sino-Tibetan language, it has related languages, Mandarin being probably one of the closest related languages to it. But other languages that are related to it are Burmese, Tibetic, Sinitic, Garo. There's actually quite a few. Some of them which I feel like I'd pronounce incorrectly, like I'm almost willing to bet money that this is not just pronounced Karen.
Hello everyone, today I will teach you how to greet in Korean. Normally,
Okay, never mind. That is how you say it. Now let's take a look real quick at the actual way that the language is set up. First off, there's big differences between Cantonese and English. Clearly, for one, Cantonese, just like Mandarin, is a monosyllabic language, versus English, which is a polysyllabic language. Cantonese and Mandarin are both tonal languages. Now, it's not exactly agreed upon how many tones Cantonese actually has. Some people think that it's up to 9, but it is generally agreed upon that it has at least 6. Those 6 tones are as follows. Tone 1 is a high-pitched tone. Tone 2 is low-mid to high-pitched. Tone 3 is a mid-pitch. Tone 4 is low-mid to low. Tone 5 is low to low-mid. And tone 6 is low-mid. Now, even though English is not a tonal language, some examples that are provided kind of show what English words usually translate to each tone. So a high tone would be in a word kind of like nation. A nation with a surprised emotion saying you would fit for the second pitch. You? For a mid-tone, it would be like international. For the fourth tone, it would be kingdom. The fifth tone, low to low mid, would be like condition. And then the low mid tone would just be yes. Now, the word order for Cantonese is subject, verb, object. However, in Cantonese, there's a lot of examples where this rule is violated. See, Cantonese is a topic prominent language, which means that the topic kind of takes priority. So that essentially means that in the case that whatever the topic is, if that topic is not the subject, then the subject verb object order will become violated. Being that Cantonese is a tonal language, tones will be what determines what each word actually means. So you can say the word the same way as in its pronunciation, but that doesn't mean that it will mean the same thing depending on how you say it. If you say a certain word in a high tone, you may mean dog, for example. And if you say it in a low tone, you may mean food. Cantonese doesn't actually have really any dialects at all, or at least not officially recognized ones, because Cantonese is actually mostly recognized itself as a dialect. Usually Taishanese is kind of considered as being a dialect of Cantonese, but this is actually a very large misunderstanding given that Taishanese is actually hardly mutually intelligible to Cantonese at all. They are basically separate dialects and languages almost like by themselves. A Taishanese speaker probably couldn't fully understand a Cantonese speaker and vice versa. Cantonese does use the same writing system as Mandarin. Same symbols are used, they're just used in different ways. Cantonese and Mandarin use the exact same writing system. Both will use traditional or simplified Chinese characters most of the time. Cantonese speakers will tend to use traditional characters more, while Mandarin speakers will typically lean towards simplified characters. But Mandarin speakers will still be able to read written Cantonese and vice versa. However, the struggle with actually understanding each other comes more so when it is spoken. Now, of course, there's a lot of differences between English and Cantonese. That is quite apparent very quickly. English is derived from the Indo-European language group, while Cantonese is derived from the Sino-Tibetan language group. So there's already a very large difference there in foundations. And I touched upon, of course, that Cantonese is a monosyllabic tonal language, while English is a polysyllabic non-tonal language. Those are usually some of the more brought up differences, but one that's actually quite interesting is actually sentence length. English can have very long sentences, using a lot of different modifiers such as pronouns, for example. That helps avoid recurrences. The sentence could be long and pretty much fairly complicated, but still easy enough and clear to understand. However, if you decided to have a sentence just as long in Cantonese, it would be incredibly difficult to understand. So Cantonese and Mandarin as well tend to actually have much shorter sentences that are a lot more easily digestible. English will emphasize sentence structure. Cantonese and Chinese will typically focus more on meaning. So as I did my interview with my language speaker, my good friend Arthur, who preferred not to be on camera, so I am going through his answers now. I asked him what languages he commonly uses, when he uses them, and with whom. So he speaks both English and Cantonese. However, Cantonese he only speaks at home and with very rarely, any Cantonese speakers outside of home, such as a couple of friends here and there. Now, he only knows how to speak Cantonese. He actually does not know how to write or read any of it. He learned his languages as a child. It was his parents that taught him how to speak Cantonese. He said that his favorite word in the language is dantat, which is a type of egg tart. He likes it because, well, food. Now, I asked him what misconceptions people typically have about his language, and he said one that I'm actually happy that he brought up, because it's something I've thought about in the past, and that's that typically Cantonese and Mandarin are just kind of jumbled together into the same group as just being Chinese. In a lot of places around the world, mostly the West, if you go out on the street and you ask a random person what is Mandarin and what is Cantonese, they probably won't know. But then you show them symbols and they'll be like, oh, that's Chinese. Well, yes, but it's not that simple. As I explained before, and as he explained to me in the interview, although they are written in the same symbols, they cannot fully understand each other. They are pretty much different languages, and China is so big and vast with so many people, it doesn't just have one language. The jumbling of them together into the same group as just being Chinese is almost as absurd as stuffing Spanish and Catalan into the same box as just being Spanish because they're both from Spain, when in the reality, they're two quite different languages. Now, I asked him what things are usually harder for him to translate into English, and he did mention it's usually official documents or government papers because it's a lot more formal language, and that's just something that kind of happens regardless of language. You know, important documents are usually going to be very formal, and it's just not language that is commonly used. So given that he was really only taught how to speak Cantonese by his family, it's not like very formal language is common. I asked him if it's easy to find other Cantonese speakers around where he lives. He lives in the Bridgeport area of Chicago, and he said that it actually has been quite easy finding other Cantonese speakers in Chicago, and it helps that Chicago is a very large city with a decent sized Asian population. I also decided to ask him what he would tell a young person that isn't sure if they want to keep using their language. And this is a common question and discussion and debate that is commonly brought up amongst immigrants in general, and he actually related very heavily to this. He said it is vital to continue using the language that you were taught. It is part of your heritage, and having that heritage just die is almost foolish. He said that this idea that some immigrants have when they get to this country, that they need to assimilate and completely wipe their heritage and their language from their identities, is heavily toxic and just wrong and almost damaging. He agreed that there is definitely some assimilation that needs to be had regardless of where you immigrate to. It doesn't just have to be to the United States, maybe another country, anywhere else in the world. He agreed that there is some assimilation needed with the culture there, but that doesn't mean that you completely eradicate the part of your identity you already have. So he mentioned that any younger person that is taught a language by their parents from their homeland is incredibly valuable and should be kept alive. I decided to also sneak in my own question that I came up